Happy New Year! Welcome to our January 8th meeting of the Rotary Club of Columbus. Please join me in a moment of silence for our member Neil Littlejohn, who passed away last week. Thank you. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the four-way test. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Of the things we think, say, or do, first, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Adrian Chester will now come and present the invocation in his faith tradition.
Let us pray. God of our weary years, God, you have been one to hear our silent tears, and we're grateful to stand this day in yet a brand new year, and we ask that you will guide our thoughts, guide our actions, that we will show your goodness by being your instruments of peace in the world through Rotary and through opportunities of service. We thank you for the opportunity to be your stewards in this world. Bless us this day and the rest of our days. It's in the name of Jesus we do pray. And we all said, amen. Don't forget about the cans. They make a difference in our community every day.
Thank you, Adrian. Leanne DeSirius has the news today.
Well, good afternoon. Here are today's headlines for Wednesday, January 8th. Honoring the legacy of Jimmy Carter. Today, we reflect on the remarkable life of President Jimmy Carter, a true servant leader who exemplified Rotary's ideals of service above self. The 39th President of the United States, Carter dedicated his life to promoting peace, fighting for human rights, and giving back through efforts like Habitat for Humanity. President Carter's body is lying in state at the U.S. Capitol, where leaders from across the country are paying their respects. As Carter once said, "My faith demands that I do whatever I can, wherever I am, whenever I can, for as long as I can." May we all strive to live by those words. And California is bringing the heat, and not in a good way. Wildfires are raging in Southern California, with the Palisades fire consuming nearly 3,000 acres so far. Fueled by strong winds and dry conditions, this fire has forced thousands to evacuate their homes. Firefighters are working tirelessly under challenging circumstances to bring it under control. And locally, Columbus is preparing for a significant winter storm expected to arrive early Friday morning. Forecasts predict a mix of snow, sleet, and icy conditions, with temperatures dropping into the 20s. While snow in our area is rare, the storm could bring disruptions, including hazardous roads, potential for school and business closures. So as Rotarians, let's be sure to check on our neighbors, especially the elderly or the vulnerable. The city is also opening warming stations for those in need. And if you don't have to be on the road, stay off the road. And today's weather is expected to be sunny with a high of 45, and the Dow was down by 94 points at 12:17 p.m. So spread kindness like sunshine and watch the world bloom around you. Have a great day.
Thank you, Leanne. Asante Hiltz will now introduce our visitors and guests.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Rotarians and guests, and Happy New Year 2025. We're excited to have several guests with us today. John Stacy has with him Laura Gower, who works for our new Congressman Brian Jack. Joe Young has with him Jennifer Upshaw, who's the Chief of Staff for Synovus. Mike Welch has with him Rob Barfield, who's with the River Birch Enterprises. Frey McCormick has a special guest, his son, Will McCormick. He's a fourth-year medical student at the Medical College of Georgia with UGA. Marquette McKnight has with her Andy Luker, who is with Media, Marketing, and More. And Michael Tuller has John Lester with him. He's at CSU as the Chief Engagement Officer. And lastly, Vivian Bishop has with her Chris Kelly, who is with Congressman Sanford Bishop's office. So thank you to all of our guests who are here. Enjoy yourselves, and we hope to have you back soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Asante. Andy Redmond will now introduce our Ralph Puckett Jr. Soldier of the Week.
President Meredith and fellow Rotarians, it's my honor to introduce to you today Lieutenant Bailey Haggins. Lieutenant Haggins is an infantry officer assigned to Fort Moore in the infantry school where she's an instructional systems designer. Commissioned in 2022 after ROTC, she has completed the Infantry Basic Officer Leaders course, Small Unmanned Aerial Systems Operators course, and as I said, currently at Fort Moore. One interesting note is she's also reigning Miss Savannah for another couple of weeks until their pageant. So we're happy to have you here today.
I just wanted to take some time to thank you all for having me here today. It's been an honor, and if you feel like you want to, come say hey to me, and I'd love to speak with you all. Thank you.
So we have some things for you. Certificate recognizing you as the Colonel Ralph Puckett Jr. Soldier of the Week. Admission to the Columbus Botanical Garden for 4 guests, and then passes for the River Center, Columbus Symphony Orchestra, the paid attractions at the Infantry Museum, Columbus State University Theater Department, and the Springer Opera House. Those are good for 2 each. A challenge coin.
Thank you very much.
And Colonel Puckett's book, Words for Warriors, that was given by Dr. Kay Sharoff in honor of the medical staff of VA hospitals and clinics.
Thank you very much.
So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Lieutenant Haggins, welcome. We appreciate your service to our country, and we're thankful that you're here with us today. Please feel free to join us again at any time. Thank you for being here. President-elect Alan Hartness has an update on reading in our schools.
Thank you, President Meredith. Hello, fellow Rotarians. We have children at United Way Community Schools here in Muskogee County School District. We have the Chattahoochee Valley Imagination Library. We have books to read. What we don't have are readers. We have 0 readers for January. Some of you need to go read to some children. Some of you need to read. Some of you need to read to some children, and I need you to sign up. Julie's going to send out another reminder email with the link so you can sign up. So please sign up for Rotary Readers. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Debbie Caballero has an update on our in-human trafficking training.
Thank you, President Meredith. Hello, everyone. Would like to invite any of you who are interested in serving on the End Human Trafficking Committee to join us. We'll meet today after this meeting, and we meet monthly to continue our planning. Today, we'll be finalizing our planning for the training that will be held from the 28th through the 30th of January. We can still use some volunteers on the day of the 30th to help us prepare for breakfast, lunch, and for snacks in the afternoon. If you'd like to join us for an hour or 2 on that day, please sign up at the back table. We'd love to have you. I also want to just take a moment to thank those of you who have been so helpful in making this event successful. Thank you to Joel Ames, who has helped us secure the facility at Piedmont. Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Larry King, for reaching out to Golden Donuts to help us provide breakfast. And thank you, Ryan Willoughby, for providing Jordan's culinary program, who will be doing the catering for our lunchtime. Thanks all so much. We look forward to having you join our work.
Thank you, Debbie. And thank you to all that have already volunteered to help us. We really appreciate it. We have our Zoom happy hour tomorrow from 6 to 8. Please join us. You'll receive a makeup, and we'll have some wonderful time of fellowship. And also, please plan to attend the District Training Assembly. That's coming up in March. It's actually March 29th from 8 o'clock to 12:30. It will be here in Columbus in this exact room. So we'd love to have a good turnout as we welcome our District Rotarians here. So please register at the back table or see Julie if you'd like to attend. At this time, I'm going to ask Past President George Flowers to introduce our program.
Thank you, President Meredith, fellow Rotarians and guests. It is my pleasure and privilege to introduce today's speaker, Kevin Blair. Kevin last spoke to us, our club, virtually in June of 2020 during the COVID pandemic, and we're pleased to have you here today in person. Kevin is the chairman and CEO of Synovus, the largest bank headquartered in Georgia. Kevin joined Synovus in 2016 as a senior EVP and Chief Operating Officer. He was named President and CEO of Synovus in 2021 and appointed Chairman in 2023. Under Kevin's leadership, Synovus is building upon its 136th year of heritage of supporting the growth and prosperity of its clients and the communities it serves. The company is focused on building upon its relationship banking commitment through new capabilities and solutions, as well as an emphasis on proactive value-added advice. As a result, the company is expanding its presence and client base while continuing to deepen and broaden its existing relationships. The company's stated purpose is to help people achieve their full potential, and their success is driving team member engagement, and overall client satisfaction serves as the proof points on their ability to deliver on this imperative. Kevin's broad experience in corporate strategy, business line management, strategic finance, and credit risk management, all combined with his strong leadership abilities, have made significant positive impact on this $60 billion asset company. He has skillfully guided his team through the transformation that is occurring in the financial services industry, embracing the unforeseen economic challenges with resilience while delivering solid financial performance. Kevin earned his bachelor's degree in business administration at James Madison University and an MBA from George Washington University. He sits on the boards of the Columbus and Metro Atlanta Chambers of Commerce, the Georgia Historical Society, the Georgia Research Alliance, and he is vice chairman of the Mid-Size Bank Coalition. Kevin is a devoted family man to his wife and children. Kevin, we appreciate Synovus's commitment to Columbus, particularly in Uptown Columbus, with the opening of the brand new Uptown beautiful Synovus office complex on Front Avenue across from the Indigo. Congratulations on that milestone achievement. Please join me in a hearty Rotary welcome to Kevin Blair.
I always love when George asks my mother to write my intro, so thank you, George. After the update, I'm going to cut this presentation short because I need to beat everyone to the grocery store to get eggs, bread, and milk. So it's great to be with everyone here today. Those words that George said, really, it takes a team to be able to be successful in the worlds we all live in. It's truly my honor to be in front of this group today. There's so many folks as I look around the room, distinguished civic leaders, community leaders, business leaders, politicians, our political leaders. For me, it's a real treat because I said to Meredith when I came this morning, I get to do this across our footprint. We serve 55 markets across our 5 states, and I've got an opportunity to speak to a lot of the Rotary clubs around the footprint, and yet it's been a while, to George's point, since I've been here since COVID, to talk about the wonderful things that we're doing here in Columbus, but ultimately to share what Synovus is doing across our footprint. And now we're a national business, so really across the United States. So I'll spend a little bit of time today talking about what we're doing. I thought I would share a little bit on the economic environment that we're seeing, and then I couldn't end today without talking about the implications of a new administration taking over the White House and what we're seeing from a bank's perspective. So if you look at this slide, this just shows our robust footprint. We are blessed in many ways, as George said, 136-year history, heritage, and we were always in the Southeast. For those of you that get to travel around this 5-state footprint, it is blowing and going. And that has come off years of COVID, but quite frankly, it really comes off the population inflows that are happening from other states around the United States. The U.S. population growth is about half of what we have in our 5-state footprint. And when you look at the household income growth, it's about 33% higher in these 5 states than it is the national average. Each year, that net population inflow is creating almost $50 billion of incremental income that's coming into these 5 states. So we are blessed. But what you see here is that our big market, when we talk about Synovus, is still Columbus, Georgia. We have #1 market share, over 50%. of the market. It's a little over $5 billion in deposits. So this market alone represents 11% of our customer deposits. So it is super, super important to us. Now, we can't put all of our eggs in one basket, and we have to continue to expand, but we haven't forgotten about where the seed was planted 136 years ago right here in Columbus, Georgia. George mentioned this, and we'll have a grand opening in January, maybe when? March. Thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer really runs the bank. If anybody hasn't had a chance to meet Jennifer, my chief of staff and our chief enablement officer, in March we're going to have a grand opening. So if you haven't had a chance, I told Mr. Alexander, this is really a sea change for our workforce. The new building is so dynamic. And when I say dynamic, it's because, as we all have learned over the last couple of years, people want to work from home. They want the flexibility. So organizations, if you want to have your team members back in the office collaborating, what you need to do is give them a reason to come in the office. And we've done that with 160,000 square feet, over 72 collaboration focus rooms. We have what I consider to be a state-of-the-art facility that houses the large majority of our 1,000 team members here in Columbus. And that's not a small feat. We still have a Bradley Park office, but for many years, Synovus has existed amongst 420,000 square feet here in Uptown. And that meant we had a lot of space, but in many cases, we didn't even see each other as we walked around. This puts us under one roof, 7 floors. Now, look, we have 5,000 square feet of outdoor facilities, nice patios. We have 2 F1 simulators. We have a golf simulator. We have 2 Pac-Man machines, a shuffleboard. It's fun. So when we do the grand opening, I hope everyone will come, look at the views, but also see how the workplace is evolving. We've also opened 2 branches, one on Front Avenue and one over in Midland Commons. And if you've been to those branches, what you'll note is that the world is changing. You're going to see smaller teller stations. It shouldn't be a surprise to anyone here. The number of teller transactions continues to decline 5 to 6% a year. Why is that? We're providing digital tools to allow people to never have to come to a branch. But when you want to go to a branch, you want something that's nearby and offers all the functionality that you need. This past year, we actually made a change. Probably we didn't communicate it. We no longer have tellers in our branch. Everyone is a relationship banker. So those of you that worked in branches in the past, you used to have a relationship banker that sat on the platform, a teller behind the teller line. Everyone's a relationship banker today. Number one, that allows our tellers to do a little more. It gives them a promotional career path that they can follow, and ultimately it allows us to pay them a little more, which I think in these sort of inflationary times is very, very wise. Also, for those sports fanatics, come April 15th, there will be baseball back in Columbus at Synovus Park. Partnering with the Diamond Baseball Group, we are very, very happy to support the Clingstones. I know it's starting to grow on me, everybody. The Clingstones, it was a tough mascot at first, but we're excited to be able to help just do a little bit to bring baseball back to Columbus. And I think it's going to be something that will bring us all together. In the world we live in today, I think that's what we need. We need to find some common interest and get together as a community and celebrate something. And I think that's what the Clingstones will offer us. But with all the things we're doing, you should know we're transforming our bank. And it didn't start last month. It didn't start last year. It's been going on since the global financial crisis. So for some, you may say, gosh, the bank looks different. It has a different name. It's no longer CB&T. That road really came out of the global financial crisis. That road map was built to allow us to compete with the largest banks in the United States, the J.P. Morgans. J.P. Morgan spends $14 billion a year on technology. Our entire market valuation at Synovus is $7 billion. So they spend twice what our company is worth every year on new technology. Well, if you're going to compete with that, and by the way, we are competing with J.P. Morgan and beating them in many cases, you have to continue to improve your go-to-market strategy. So whether that was unifying our brand, collapsing our charters, to adding new products and capabilities, we've had to keep up with that because you guys all know technology is changing how we interact every day, not just in e-commerce, but at the bank and in all of our daily lives. So we've invested a lot in people and technology and new solutions, and I believe we've created what I consider to be the Goldilocks principle. We have all the capabilities and functionalities that the big banks have, but we haven't lost sight of being personal and attentive like the smaller institutions. So We want to be the small, big bank where we value personal attention, but give you everything you need and expect in your financial service provider. The great news for us, that transformation wasn't built on a weak foundation. As everyone knows, you can't build a house if you don't have a solid foundation. Our foundation has been built for 136 years, but it starts with our team members. And like Joe Young, who's in the room here today, and George for so many years, we believe that what differentiates banks are not those products and solutions. We can find ways to create similar technologies, but what you can't find is people that generally care about their clients. And I think that's what we've created. We've looked at our engagement, which just is how we value how our team members think about the company. Last year, we rated within the top 5% of all companies in the United States for team member engagement, how passionate they are about their company. 2023, we won the J.D. Power #1 bank in the Southeast for client service, but also trust. Now, that was 2023, just to show that I'm honest. This past year, we finished third out of all the banks. So you can't win every year, but if you're in the top 3 or #1 in 2023 in J.D. Power, it tells us we're doing something right. And there's a commercial study that's like J.D. Power. It's called Greenwich. And they don't give out rankings, but they give you number of awards. We won 25 awards for 2024, which put us the 4th highest of any bank in the United States. So it tells me that culture that we've had for 136 years exists today, serving our clients with engaged team members. And our turnover, our voluntary turnover in 2024 was the lowest we've had in over 10 years. So our team members are saying it's a great place to work. That's the key to all of this. You can have all the great products in the world, but if you don't have a great culture and great team members, you can't deliver them. Now, when you hear about banks going through a transformation, you generally think that's going to put a bump in the road as it relates to earnings. What you can see from this chart, if I look at the last 10 years, we have grown our earnings per share at an annual rate of 16%. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if you could get 16% return on your equity portfolio, Joe, you'd be pretty happy with that each year. So 16% growth in EPS. You'll see 2 bars on here that look lower. The one back in 2020, that's when I was speaking to you last time, that was COVID. The way the bank accounting works, when everybody thought the world was coming to an end, we have to reserve for a lot of bad loans. That's why the earnings went down that year. That didn't happen. So you can see the years after that we recovered. You'll see another one just in 2023. You want to know what that is? That's the big $70 million payment we had to make to the FDIC to cover the failed institutions that happened that year, Silicon Valley, First Republic. So when you hear in the news that you guys or that the taxpayer is paying for those failed banks, they're not. It's the banks. They come back to us and hit us with a $70 million charge. And I can tell you, we don't take that $70 million and add fees to each of your accounts. We don't do that. So the 2 years that had a little bit of a retracing were years that COVID and years where other banks failed, and it wasn't Synovus. Now, what gets me super excited, and I know we have to close the chapter on 2024 and move on to 2025, but we get included in an index in the financial services industry called the KBW Mid-Cap Index. So it's all banks, generally between $10 and $100 billion, and those are 50 institutions. When the books were closed last year, we finished #1 out of all 50 of those institutions in our stock price, up almost 60% in our stock price. And so you can believe me and all these awards, or you can believe what the shareholders are saying because they believe that we're doing something that differentiates us in a crowded landscape. How are we doing it? So when I was blessed to receive the baton from Kessel Stelling 3 years ago, we came up with these 4 pillars. And they haven't changed because I don't believe that your strategy has to change each year, but rather your execution around that. And it starts with reposition for advantage. The thing I would say for any business leader is it goes back to the Jim Collins flywheel conversation. You have to play where you have the right to win. As I mentioned earlier, we're the 39th largest bank in the United States. That sounds very large, but as you can tell from my comparison to JP Morgan, we're quite small relative to some of the larger institutions. So Synovus cannot be everything to everyone. And if you try to be everything to everyone, you peanut butter your spend across everything and you're average at everything. The hard decisions of leaders, and I know you make them every day, is to decide where you have the right to win and you double your investments there. And that doesn't mean that you can't invest in other areas, it just means you can't invest enough. And that's what we've tried to do over the last 3 years. Double down in the places we have the right to win and harvest the areas where maybe we can't win or we have a disadvantage, scale, technology, whatever. Number two, simplify and streamline. If there's one thing that we can do to help each of you from a client experience standpoint, it's just to make it easier. We know it every day because when we buy something off Amazon, it's one click, it's at your house the next day. Everyone wants immediate gratification. So we need to streamline the loan process, how you open accounts, how you move money. And we do that every year. It's not a one-time occasion because you have to every year improve how you deliver digitally and through our branch network. Number three, high tech, high touch. What I would submit to you is the larger banks are going to be using things like AI to help to drive their costs lower and to remove humans from the interaction. We believe that we'll use technology to allow you to do self-serve transactions, but we interject a human being when you have a question or you need something. I still think that human interaction is critical and we can't lose that. And lastly, we got to continue to develop and invest in our teams. Now let's talk about the economy. This slide, I'm a banker. I put little teeny slides and I can tell you what it says because you can't read them anyway. So I'll tell you what it says. This was a third quarter survey that we go out to all of our commercial clients every quarter and say, how are you feeling? What this says is we've had a last couple quarters where business owners have felt okay. About 20% of business owners feel like things are getting better over the next 12 months. About 50% say they'll stay the same, and about 30% say they're going to get worse. And that's been fairly stable. Hot off the presses, we just got our fourth quarter survey in. The numbers have jumped up, meaning that people are much more bullish. And I'll talk about why that's the case. But generally, this tells us that we should expect the economy, which has grown this year about 2.9%, to continue at roughly the same pace. We shouldn't see any inflection points where it's going to grow much faster or conversely much slower. We also invested during COVID on some analytics, and these analytics look at all of our clients and look at their cash inflows versus their outflows. And that gives us an early warning mechanism if we see a particular industry that's having a problem or if we see global macro issues. What you can see here by the trend of that line is inflows and outflows are both coming down. So what that says, and this is the thing that we learned during COVID, the American business community is extremely resilient. As their inflows came down, their outflows came down, so they balanced it. The good news is what we're seeing here is that the inflows, the money they're bringing in, are starting to pick back up in certain industries where they've been hit. So again, it's a second proof point that says the economy's fairly stable. We don't see any cliff events in the near term. It all comes down to consumer spending. 70% of GDP is from consumer spending. What this chart would tell you is that we're starting to see some challenges with discretionary spending. People have gotten to the point where inflation has bitten their savings and investments such that they're starting to slow down on some of their discretionary spending. If you look at the right, where they haven't slowed down is on travel. So what we learned during COVID is that people now care more about experiences than they do goods. And I'll show you a chart later where that really shows. But ultimately, where people are spending discretionary, it's less on clothing, as you can see here in apparel, it's more on experiences. But the consumer is still solid, but it's starting to see some deterioration. And you can see it here, and it's something you read about every day. It's the haves and the have-nots. The sentiment of the high-income wage earners is getting higher, and the sentiment of the low-income wage earners are getting lower. And so there's got to be a breaking point at some point. And if you look at middle-income folks, they're about average. So they're, I don't know. But to the right, what you'll note is that the U.S. personal savings rate is only at 2.9%. So that means for every dollar saved, people on average are only saving 3 cents. The national average over the last 50 years is about 7 to 8 cents. So it tells us that over time, fewer savings means that people are less likely to spend on discretionary items, especially large ticket items. So we have to watch consumer spending. Now, this is the one I mentioned earlier. If you see the chart, right after COVID, the percent of consumer spending skyrocketed towards goods. And I put on there RVs, decks, everybody, new bikes. Everybody wanted to buy a boat. Everyone wanted to get out and experience life. And services, were lower than normal. Well, what's happened now is a lot of those goods, people bought them. They're not buying another boat or another grill or another deck. And now services are coming back. So what I would tell you is the economy today is back to a normal economy. as it relates to consumer spending. We're kind of coming out of that COVID latency where people had pent up money and dollars to go spend on certain goods. So I'll conclude with this and hopefully have a couple minutes. My take on the election, there's a lot of things they're going to occur. There are a lot of things that have been said that won't occur. But what you can see here is that if you ask me what Trump's going to focus on, he's focused a lot on the stock market, and I'll talk about that. He's focused a lot on America and what he wants to do to bring jobs back to America, manufacturing. He's talked about deportation. And what you should know is that he's a lame duck president. So this is his second term. And so he doesn't have as many constraints. He's legacy building. So he's going to try to do some bold things. Like we heard yesterday, instead of the Gulf of Mexico, maybe it'll be the Gulf of Americas. I don't know. But what I would tell you is, if you look at this chart, kind of whether you're a Democrat or Republican, pull yourself back. There's only been 2 administrations since 1960 that have had negative returns in the equity markets, Richard Nixon and George Bush. Outside of that, all the other presidents have seen positive growth in the S&P. So what does that mean? It's really less about the political cycles. It's much more about the economic cycles and what happens and the geopolitical risk that could happen here. So I'm pretty bullish on the stock market, but it's not solely based on the administration. Number 2, when you look at the level of tariffs, and this is the one thing that people have talked a lot about, I had to go back and do a history lesson. Up until 1913, the United States didn't have an income tax. So tariffs were the only way the United States government were able to receive revenues. Since 1913 up to 1947, when the U.S. government exited World War II, enacted something called GATT, tariffs were still the predominant way in which the United States were able to get receipts. After the World War, they wanted to promote economic stability across the world. They wanted to create a global economy, so we basically got rid of tariffs. If you believe what President Trump says, we would go back to the highest level of tariffs since 1944. And every economist would say that would not be good for the United States. Why? Because you saw earlier, 70% of the GDP is consumer spending. So if your consumer spending is weaker because you can't afford what you did before, it's going to slow it down. So Scott Bessent, who's the Treasury nominee, he has said publicly, I look at tariffs as a surgical tool, not as a rigid policy. So I read into all that. That's just a negotiation point. They're going to go and negotiate and try to get what they want. I don't anticipate tariffs going up as much as we've talked about. And on the other side of the slide, what you should note, we talked about China, and I think President Trump said a 60% increase in tariffs there. China is no longer the biggest importer in the United States. Mexico took that distinction last year. So they represent about 15% of our imports. China now only 14%. So it shows you the United States, because of what happened in COVID and having supply chain diversification, we've already started to change who our trade partners are, knowing that supply chain logistics is going to be challenging based on some of the geopolitical risks that exist. When you think about corporate taxes, I know a lot of people would say, God, he's going to lower corporate tax rate to 15%. I would bet against that, right? If you look at what happened during his last administration, he lowered it to 21% because the United States was out of line. We were much higher than other industrialized nations. He did that. And the thing you should know is that 85% of the government's revenue comes from personal taxes, only 9% from corporate taxes. So if he's going to wage a battle, he's going to wage the battle on extending the personal tax cuts that we already enjoy today. And that cost us about $7 trillion in the budget to extend those. So I would bet against corporate tax rate cuts, and I would say that he's going to spend all of his energy trying to extend the personal tax cuts. And then, when you look at spending, I'll just leave you here. Only 27% of the U.S. budget is now discretionary. At some point, folks, we're going to have to pay the piper. We're going to have to increase taxes, or we're going to have to cut spending on non-discretionary items. When only 27%, which includes all discretionary with military, is 27%, you can't balance the budget without touching Medicare, Medicaid, and no politician's going to run on that. So either you're going to have to raise taxes, or you have to cut the non-discretionary items, because our debt through this forecast is going to get to be about 140% of GDP, which isn't alarming, but it's starting to get to that point where it's becoming excessive. So I'd watch that over the next 20 years. And then I'll leave you with a positive, because I felt like I gave you some negatives. AI. Look, there's one thing you should know, and everyone talks about AI as this negative, creepy thing that's going to take over the world and ruin our lives. It's really something that we have to think about in the United States, because if you look at this chart, we have a big head start. The United States has gone all in on AI technology, well ahead of China, well ahead of the other countries. And it has the potential of doing basically what personal computing and mobile technology did over the last 50 years combined, in terms of adding productivity to our workforce, which will allow us to solve one of the biggest problems we still have, which is a labor shortage. We still have a labor shortage in the United States. And if we want to grow at the pace we want to continue to grow the economy, we're going to have to find good immigration where we increase the number of people that can come into our country legally. We're going to have to find ways to add productivity. So instead of firing people because of AI productivity, you reassign them to something that's more productive. We've got to double down here. And if you want to read something fun, go read about the new quantum computing technology that Google just came out with called Willow. They solved a problem in 5 minutes that took a macro Cray research computer 10 trillion years to solve. Now, I don't even know how to fathom that. I just know that it's really fast. So the world's going to continue to get faster and faster, and with AI, the next question you have to ask yourself is, will we have enough energy to support all these data centers and everything else that's producing this? And that'll be a different conversation. But I am very excited about what the United States can do for AI. So I'll leave you bullish on the year. As a company, the two things I would tell you: take advantage of this growth opportunity that's in front of you. But also, if you're heavily reliant on supply chain, I don't think the tariffs are going to play out. Start to diversify your supply chain. That's what I would tell you, and we see that across our client base. At Synovus, I would just tell you, we are prepared for next year. We think it's going to produce tremendous growth for us. We, as I mentioned earlier, $50 billion coming into our 5-state footprint every year. We're going to take our share of that. We have to continue to serve our clients like we always have and focus on the relationship, and we got to manage risk. I didn't talk about credit at all, but credit is in a very good place. I think, like most media sources, everyone said that credit was going to implode, commercial real estate was bad, everyone was going to have bad loans. That hasn't happened. It hasn't happened at Synovus. It hasn't happened largely across the industry. So I'm very bullish for next year, and I hope you guys are as well. Thank you for letting me be here today, and I'm happy to field one question or two.
We have time for questions. We have time for questions. We have microphones coming around, so please feel free to ask your question, and Kevin will answer.
Thank you.
Hey, Marquette.
I'm curious if you could give us a few examples of how Synovus is continuing to develop leadership, not only for Synovus, but for the communities that it serves.
It's a great question. 2 years ago, we started a program called Catalyst, and it has Connect. So we choose between 10 and 20 people every year. We put them through an annual program. It goes for a couple years, and it not only teaches them leadership, but it also gives them the ability to work with a third-party executive coach. Because what I would tell you about leadership, anybody that says they can just go create a leader in 10 classes or 2 weeks of training, that doesn't exist. I think leadership is largely innate. So what you have to do as an organization to create leaders is give them the opportunity at work to excel, 2, give them the support system and give them new knowledge, whether that's through this program, but 3, not only do they have a leader in the building, but they have a professional coach that's going to work with them for a year or two to critique and provide constructive feedback. What I've learned about great leaders, they're the ones that take that constructive feedback and do something about it. I've always said the biggest risk we have as business leaders is to have the big head, little feet syndrome. Big head, that we sit around and think about all the things we could do, and little feet, we never move anywhere. So I believe the future here and in our community, we got to have those big head folks, but we got to put some big shoes on them to let them move forward. And so it's all about helping leaders understand what drives execution. So whether it's curriculum, whether it's mentorships, whether it's these executive coaching, that's what we focus on. Nobody's gonna let me off easy. Joe, you don't ask about bonuses this year. Don't.
You're talking about like Synovus' positioning in the marketplace. you talk about, double down in the places that you can compete. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some of those areas where you say, hey, we're going to come to market and we're going to win when we have these opportunities?
Yeah, this is where when I talk about this inside our four walls at the bank, it makes people feel a little edgy, because if you're not in one of the areas I mentioned, they start to feel bad. But what we said was we were going to double down in what we call commercial banking. So from small business all the way up to corporate banking. And why is that? We look at the data that suggests which banks are winning in that space. It's not those money center banks. It's not JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, B of A, because they forgot what we learned here, which is clients want personal attention. So we've doubled down in commercial. We have a full capability from small business all the way up to this past year. We added a corporate and investment bank for the first time in the history of our institution, because we saw a lot of clients who were graduating out of Synovus. They would leave us to go to JP Morgan. And I said, that really stinks. We spend 20 years getting them up to size and making a lot of money, and then they go to the big banks because we don't have the capability. So we said commercial, number one. Number two, we said private wealth management. And why is that? Because relationships matter. You have to garner a trusted relationship to get a wealthy or mass affluent person to come and give you their business. It's not all technology. It's not all scale. So we double down there. So that kind of leaves out consumer banking. If you look at the 246 branches that we have across our 5-state footprint, we're probably not going to be reducing or adding a ton more. But what we've seen is that the mass consumer, by a large percentage, has been moving to B of A and Wells Fargo and JP Morgan. And why is that? When you survey those clients, it's all based on a premise that they believe that they're getting better service and better value from those larger institutions. Now, as good as we are at Synovus, we're not going to change people's beliefs on that. So what we have to do within our branches, as you've seen this last year, we've had our branches focus a little more on the mass affluent. It's not that we don't bank the mass consumer. And now our retail market managers, our branch managers are out finding small business clients around their branch so that they can focus on that segment that is under penetrated with the larger institutions. Last question.
How has Synovus's philanthropic and community giving changed as you've increased your input, and what impact are you guys looking to have in 2025?
I was telling Jennifer, who runs all this, so if anybody wants checks, Jennifer's here today. She's sitting in the front row. No. Look, what's changed, and the hard part about getting larger as an institution, as our revenue base gets larger, we want to grow the numbers of donations that we can make. During the global financial crisis, those that live here in Columbus and we're around, we used to have a foundation. We eliminated the foundation back in the global financial crisis to use that as capital. So unlike some of the larger banks who have this big pot of money that they earn interest off of or get returns off each year and they get to donate it, we don't have that. So we've had to start building ours back. We created a small foundation 3 years ago. We've added to it again this year. But we give out about a little over $2 million a year. Now, that sounds like a lot to each of us individually, but when you think about 5 states, 55 markets, 5,000 team members, it's hard. So I tell Jennifer she has the most challenging job in our company to take all of those noble causes that come in and say, we need some help, and to figure out how do you do it where you have the biggest impact across the broadest audience. She was telling me on the way in here, this year, 60% of that went to Columbus. So we haven't changed who we are because this is where we started, and we're still giving a lion's share of our dollars into this community. Over time, to be honest, that's going to continue to be a challenge. So the key is we got to grow the revenue faster so we can make that 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million. Then even though it may not be 60%, it may be more dollars that stay here in Columbus. So that's our challenge, and we believe it's who we are. We've got to continue to give back, and we've got to find ways to continue to increase the bigger pool so we can give out more to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for giving us an update on Synovus, and thank you for the contributions Synovus makes in all their markets to the communities that they serve. In your honor for being here today, we're going to place a children's book in the Columbus Public Library. So thank you again for being here.
And I might even come read it. I'll read it.
Natalia's been busy over the Christmas break. She's going to share a quick update on what she's been up to.
Hi, everyone. I'll try to keep this one brief, but I did a lot, so I wrote some stuff down. First, I went to Savannah with 16 other students. We had a lot of fun, and then Alan drove me back, and we had a fun road trip to Columbus. Then I baked with Barbara, and we did a lot of Christmas baking. We're talking pound cake, pecan cheesecake pie, lots of cookies, fudge, all the good stuff. And then I did this big road trip with Louise. We drove through Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, and then we went to Grand Rapids, where her daughter lives, and we had a great time. We did a lot of stuff, but I saw a lot of snow, which is rare for me, as I'm from Brazil. And I saw the Great Lake, Michigan, and unfortunately, my shoes got wet on the 15 Fahrenheit weather, so that was not fun. And then we went to Chicago, where her son lives, and we also did a lot of stuff. I saw the Chicago Bean and cold weather, and it was much colder than Michigan, but still a lot of fun. And on our way back from the road trip, we stopped at Nashville for a night, and that was really fun as well. And we picked up another GRSP student, Enzo from Brazil, before heading for Panama City Beach, Florida for New Year's. And I found the Emerald Coast to be really beautiful, and we got to see the ball drop on New Year's Eve. That was really, really nice, and like fireworks and everything. And this week I started my classes at CSU. This semester I'll be taking Principles of Marketing, Introduction to Creative Nonfiction Writing with Dr. G, Analysis of Financial Statements for Investment and Management, and Global Economic Issues. And I also started working as a student assistant at the Butler Center for the Economic Research and Development in the Turner College of Business as a public relation representative. That's it.
Thank you, Natalia, for that update. We are mighty proud of you. You continue to make us proud, and we look forward to following your progress this semester at CSU, so thank you. I'd like to re-welcome our visitors and guests. Thank y'all for being here. Our Soldier of the Week, thank you for being here. Our program next week is David Owens with the CSU Archives, so he'll be here, and I know you'll want to be here to hear from him. If there's no further business, we stand adjourned. Y'all have a great rest of the week. Thank you.